The Retirement Cafe podcast, The Power of Music for Dementia with Grace Meadows. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Retirement Cafe podcast. Before we meet this week's guest, I just wanted to say thank you to Robin Powell, who left a review titled Valuable Service recently. Robin wrote, Justin's podcast provides a truly valuable service for anyone thinking about retirement. Robin's a well-respected journalist, author and co-founder of The Evidence-Based Investor. And he will be a guest on this very podcast in the new year, so make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss that episode. Now, let's get into this week's episode, the last one before Christmas. I hope that your preparations are well underway and that you are looking forward to some quality time with your loved ones. I've had many conversations on the podcast about dementia because I know how much of a concern it is for so many of our listeners. This comes as no surprise when I read that 52% of people in the UK know someone affected by this cruel syndrome. Today's guest offers hope for improving the quality of life for people living with dementia. So I'm delighted to introduce you, Grace Meadows. Grace has created a lifelong career in music, having initially trained as a professional bassoonist. For the last decade, she has worked as a qualified music therapist in a variety of health, social care and educational settings with children and adults of all ages. Her clinical experience is vast and includes autism and communication impairments, child development, mental health and learning disabilities. She's currently the campaign director for Music for Dementia, a national campaign calling for music to be an integral part of care for everyone living with dementia, which is what she's here to discuss with me today. In our conversation, Grace shares her passion for music and its vast benefits. She explains why and how music connects and why she believes music is a necessity for people living with dementia. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Grace and feel as inspired and hopeful as I did. Welcome to the Retirement Cafe podcast, Grace Meadows.
Thank you. It's brilliant to be chatting with you.
Yeah, so I think I've got a feeling I might have caught you in your kitchen.
Kitchen come, study come. This has been my world for the last 18 months or so. One-stop shop for all things music and dementia.
So Grace, tell me a little bit about yourself and what you're up to.
Well, I am by training a musician and a music therapist, and really I was thinking about this the other day, that actually my life has really had a musical thread through it since a really young age. I didn't come from a musical family, but found my own way, as children do, to their interests and passions. And it sort of started like lots of children with a recorder and singing in the church choir. Then it was the violin came home one day, much to my parents' horror. What is that squeaky noise that follows us around everywhere? To that turning into a bassoon, to complete amazement of what is that thing in a box kind of thing. And then a very serious passion that turned into, I want to go to music college and train as a bassoonist, as you do. And then really from there it was, I knew I was never going to make it as a world-class first bassoonist in a National Symphony Orchestra. I didn't think I had the discipline for that, but I realized that also I didn't want to pursue a purely performing career, and that for me something was missing when I performed, and for me that was the reciprocal aspect of music and the relationship that you have with music. For me, I was finding that music was much more about people and relationships and communication, as opposed to doing music to people in a performance sense. So after music college, I took a little bit of time out and then found my way back into music by discovering music therapy, really. Wow. And doing introductory courses to music therapy and discovering new musical skills. As a Western classically trained musician, you've got quite a rigid way of playing music sometimes. And so I challenged myself by doing an improvisation course, because a lot of music therapy is very improvisatory based. And then trained as a music therapist.
So great. Can I just pick up on
Yeah.
music therapist? Because,
Mm.
it's, with all honesty, it's not a term that I'm really familiar with. And I'm going to be the one, I'm sure my audience will know all about it. But, seeing as we're having the chat, can you tell me about music therapy? I mean, I understand therapy. I'm going to come and lie on a couch and I'm going to tell you my problems. But tell me about music therapy in its specificity. I can't say that word.
It's always a tricky one. Well, with music therapy, it is some of that couch stuff, but it's happening through music rather than through words often. So when words are too much, or they're not enough, or they're no longer available because of illness or injury or disability, music is that alternative channel for communication where you can put into sound expressions and feelings and emotions that words just can't convey for you. And that's particularly useful for people with learning disabilities, people who no longer have verbal capacity. It's really useful with people with a mental health issue where words don't quite articulate some of the internal workings of what's going on with those conditions, and for people with dementia where they no longer have verbal capacity, the ability to respond to music is still very much present. And really, what I think is so wonderfully amazing about a career as a music therapist is that you can work with people from across the lifespan. So I've worked with mums to be right through to people at end of life and everything in between. That's the joy of the job, really. You get to work with such a wonderful variety of people. It's a real privilege. And I think the thing that I've always found is that no matter what somebody is living with, you still get to see them for who they are beyond their condition when you're working with them in music, because you're working on that real strengths-based ability potential model, as opposed to the deficit model of, well, this person's got this wrong with them, they can't do that, they're never going to be able to do this, so on and so forth. Whereas with music, it's so boundless. It's all about opportunity and potential, and trying to realize that it's a very encouraging, supportive way of working with people.
So can you give me kind of an example of some, obviously no names, but someone that you've worked with who you found a remarkable kind of transition or from your therapy? How did it unfold? What did you do? How does it work? Because I think there may be a lot of people who listen to this and go, do you know what, that's for me, actually. That would really help me. So how would you go about working with somebody? Or maybe just give me a couple of stories of people you have worked with which you've had success.
When I get asked this question, I always go back to my first encounter therapy, which was real privilege of shadowing a highly skilled and wonderful music therapist. And we were doing a group session, so there were 4 people in the group, and each of them came into the room. They were still mobile, and they had varying degrees of dementia and varying degrees of verbal capacity, and they each were really withdrawn at that point, and they weren't communicating with each other, they weren't connecting with each other. And I thought, how does this work? Like, these people aren't responsive. I don't get a sense of groupness here. But slowly but surely, through this gentle musical guiding of the music therapist, we suddenly had the most lively group of people in that room together, being connected through the music. We had one woman who was talking very much about her love of gospel music, and she was telling stories through gospel songs that she was singing. We had another gentleman that wanted to get up and dance. We had another lady who hadn't spoken for a long time, and she had a real little sparkle in her eye once the music got going and the music therapist was responding and improvising to the sort of feelings in the room. And I remember her getting up and taking my hand and us dancing together. And I thought, this is remarkable. This woman wasn't doing this 10 minutes ago. And at the end of that piece of improvisation, she leant in and her mouth was moving and her eyes were sparkling. And it sounded as though she said to me, thank you. And I said to the music therapist afterwards, like, I think she said thank you to me. And she said, that's amazing, because she hasn't been known to speak for such a long time. And that's the thing about music, it can have that profound effect. But what was so moving and remarkable about that experience was how connected people were in the here and now. Yes, we had drawn on memories to bring people together, but actually what those memories enabled was that connection in the here and now. And what we had around us were 4 really vibrant human beings who were connected through music, and they were together, and we were with them. And it wasn't about us doing the music to them, it was about us co-creating the music. And it, you know, it was drawing on different aspects of their personalities, of the music that they were bringing, and the mastery of that music therapist in terms of giving everyone space to be heard and to contribute and be part of a really non-judgmental creative experience was really powerful. And it has so much to do with why I'm doing what I do now, leading the Music for Dementia campaign.
Yeah, amazing. So that sounds a fantastic segue straight into, tell me about the Music for Dementia campaign.
Well, the Music for Dementia campaign is a national campaign backed by the Utley Foundation to try and make music an integral part of care. And we passionately believe this, not only because the evidence and the research demonstrates the power of music for people living with dementia, but we know that sadly there isn't a cure for dementia, but we have this incredible tool at our fingertips called music that enables us to connect with people living with dementia. It allows them to connect with themselves, the world around them, the people around them. It allows them to contribute to their communities, to their families. It allows them to be in the here and now. It helps to address some of the symptoms of dementia, such as anxiety, depression, apathy, anxiety. And importantly, it allows them to be who they are beyond their condition. And that happens at all stages of dementia. So from the point of diagnosis right through to end of life, there's still this ability to connect and communicate through music. And it's not about having been a musician or having had a musical training. It's about us being musical beings. And fundamentally, we are all innately musical beings, whether we believe that to be true or not, whether you think you've got a good singing voice or not, or you know, whether you've never picked up an instrument in your life, you know, everybody has the capacity to be musical and to respond to music, because actually it's hardwired into us. You know, the first thing that we respond to is our mother's heartbeat in the womb. We develop our ability to hear about 15 to 18 weeks in the womb. You know, before we've learnt language, we've learnt to respond to melody, and you know, in our caregivers' interactions with us, we are, and I passionately believe this, in case there's any doubt in my voice about this, that we are musical beings. And so, and wonderfully, we have this evidence base, the scientific evidence base that backs that up to show that we have this capacity to respond to music, and that it does have these transformational impacts on people living with dementia, which is why we're calling for it to be an integral part of dementia care.
So, you know, a lot of people will be very interested in this, and they'll be thinking, you know, I have conversations with people so often who've got a relative suffering from dementia of some sort. What can they do?
This is a brilliant question. I think a lot of people feel because they're not trained musicians, they can't make the music happen, but they absolutely can. It's about getting to know somebody, having a musical conversation, finding out what music matters to them. So, for example, if I was working with you with music, the first thing I'd do is try and find out what your life in music has been like, what's been the soundtrack to your life, what music matters to you and why, what's your story in music. And I'd take it from there, really. I'd be thinking about the music that you loved as a young person, the music that has been with you at momentous points in your life. And then I'd be thinking about, well, what's your need with music? Like, what are you struggling with, or what are you finding difficult to cope with? Is it that you have this diagnosis and it's challenging you psychologically? You're really struggling with the diagnosis, and you're feeling quite depressed and demotivated, in which case it might be about working with a music therapist. But it doesn't have to be at that level. It could be something as simple as, I know that it's really hard to get up in the morning, and it's about putting on the piece of music that's going to help you on your way that day. It might be that you're struggling to settle in the evenings, and it's about, again, putting on that piece of music. It could be about trying to find a way to connect back with your partner, for example, and readdress the care balance. I know that you talked a lot about this with Jane in the wonderful podcast that you did with her, and there's so much crossover there with what she was talking about. But this idea of addressing the care balance, where actually partners can be partners again, family members can be family members, as opposed to caregivers. And that's because music's a great leveler. And you know that it can be very powerful to make time in the day, just 5 minutes to sit and have a musical connection together, listening to a favorite piece of music, where you know it invites and encourage eye contact or communication or hand holding. It's that quality of contact that music can open up. So there are lots of simple things that we can do. A lot of people use music in care in a very simple way to help motivate things around eating, dressing, encouraging movement. Simple everyday tasks that with dementia can be disorientating, or challenging or confusing, whereas music can help put routines back in, help make things feel familiar and safe. A lot of the times when someone has dementia, they can feel really rather unsafe because they're not sure, they're confused, they're disorientated. Whereas music that has an emotional resonance for them, that makes them feel safe and connected, can help make some of those things much more easy to do.
Wow. Well, I mean, amazing. And of course, for people who, I'm just thinking about one of our neighbours whose mum has recently gone into a care home because of dementia. And of course, she'll know what her mum liked, what music her mum liked, and what her, and may still have the music collection. So if you go and play music to someone who you know with dementia, does it? Because I mean, you see these wonderful viral videos where people playing all this music, and what is possible? Is communication now then in that moment more possible than it was before, or what's your experience?
I think similarly to what Jane was saying, that it very much depends on each person's presentation and the dementia, the type of dementia they have, how far advanced that dementia is, and how you're using music with them. But it's not unusual to find that somebody who doesn't have particularly good verbal skills pre an encounter with music, to be able to use music, to be able to use words, after that musical encounter. And that's because the brain has been stimulated, and those words have been activated again through the singing of familiar songs. So sometimes people will report that, you know, my mum was able to have a conversation with me for 2, 3, 4 hours after that singing that we did together. It's really, it's fascinating, and it's not clear actually, because dementia is so personal in terms of how it presents and the way it affects people, you know, that there's a standard response. But what we do know is that because music is processed across the whole brain and not just in one area, that's why you get these incredible responses to music. So when parts of the brain are being affected by dementia, music will do that mercurial thing it does and find its way to another part of the brain, which means that these interactions still happen. And also because we've got so many different types of memory, again, because the dementia is affecting different parts of the brain, it means that some memory functionality is still left intact, which means that responses to music are still able to happen. Wow. So the science is fascinating and complex, and I'm definitely not an expert in that. But what I have seen is that it really does, because of, again, something that Jane spoke about, is I may not know who you are, but it was the feeling that was evoked. And it's that feeling. So if I think about a song from my teenage years, I still don't know the words to that song, but I know the feeling that song evoked in me, and it still evokes the same feeling. I still think of the people that I loved that song with, and it still has that power over me. And I'm sure in years to come, perhaps even if I get dementia, that song will still be able to evoke that sort of ability to connect and link with those memories.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm getting the sense that that we could be missing a trick just in day-to-day life as well here. Because if it's not such impactful, if it's so impactful in people with therapy and with dementia, when I say we, the collective we, are we listening to enough music? Are we, is the television going on too early? And are we taking time to just sit and listen?
Well, I would always advocate for more music, no doubt about that. And I think it's really, this is something that we've been doing recently in our work with UK music, the music industry, about looking at how can we better make use of music to support our health and well-being across society. So absolutely for people living with dementia, but what about children and young people and our mental health? What about all the incredible care workers and health workers who've supported everyone over the pandemic, and the mental health traumas that they're experiencing now, PTSD and so on, of processing everything that they have lived through? We know that music's really effective in helping to address mental health, just in terms of keeping us healthy and motivated. We use music in so many therapeutic ways that we're not really tuned into the fact that we're using music in those ways. Even there's something as simple as singing in the shower to your favorite song on the radio, it has an impact on you. And I think there's a piece that we can be doing much more broadly around helping people to be more in touch with the therapeutic benefits of music and how they can be using it, as you say, to harness that power and to help us be healthier, happier people.
And of course, whereas I was just imagining myself sitting and listening to music, I also, of course, getting up and, what I hate to do, but getting up and dancing, moving your body. And, and as thinking about teenagers and, the tough time that they've particularly had in kind of the lockdown scenarios and being able to disappear to your bedroom and listen to music, and maybe, of course, I'm way older than you, but I remember, you weren't turning on a telly or a gaming machine, so the radio was your solace. You'd be able to access the outside world through that was significant. And I yes, again, the music I got was the top 40 on a Sunday night, with the mixtape.
Oh yeah, pressing record and play to make your own little mixtape. Yes,
our audience will understand this, I'm sure. Yeah, so there is I can see there's a huge amount of benefit of families, if they're struggling kind of together, what have you, get music on.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many, today we have so many ways to access music. You don't have to have a musical person in the family in order to make the music happen. You've got myriad ways online of accessing music. There's so many musical films out there. We've seen like so many creative opportunities come online throughout the pandemic, in terms of ballets being made available, jazz concerts, world music. There's such a rich world to go and immerse yourself in and get interested in and be passionate about and be connected to other people through. I think for me, the really powerful thing about music is what it does for relationships and the ripple effects it has. I think that's one of the challenges we have. And I say we, that those using music in a health and well-being context, is trying to articulate the benefits beyond the numbers. So, how do you quantify the fact that being able to use music with somebody living with dementia has changed someone's day? So there wasn't a difficult, challenging moment where you needed to go out to the doctors and you were able to use music to make that transition from the home to the GP surgery much smoother and easier because you were able to use music to make that happen. How do you quantify that? How do you talk about the money saved, the energy saved, the emotional expense of that's been reduced because you were able to put music on and use that and hum along in the car or whatever it might have been? That is something that we're trying to grapple with at the moment in terms of how do you articulate that value, both on an economic level, but also an emotional, social level, because it's those things that really add up for a carer in terms of the burden of caring. That emotional expense, that psychological expense, that energy expense. How do we help top up the bank as I like to call it, of the emotional credits with music to keep that carer being able to do what they want to do, without them toppling over into a crisis mode, where ultimately that's a really expensive position for that person, but also for society. It's so much more expensive caring for somebody in crisis than it is caring for somebody in a preventative way.
Sure. So, Grace, I'm going to give you a magic wish now. One magic wish, right? What do you change? What do you do with this magic wish? Anything can happen.
Are you sure I can only have one?
Yeah.
I think what I would do with my magic wish is demonstrate the real breadth of the value of music to people who have the power to change systems, so that we can properly embed music into dementia care across the kind of dementia experience, from diagnosis through to end of life. And as part of that wish, I would help people to feel empowered and confident and creative in using music, and help them to see that they don't have to be trained musicians to make the music happen. It's about having that knowledge and the confidence and the permission to go out and give it a go, and to use it as they can in their daily roles, to help improve the quality of life and care for people living with dementia. That was a bit of a stretch there. I'm sorry. That's a bit of a therapeutic elective.
It's okay. I'm the wish granter, so it's all fine. You're allowed. You're allowed. So, Grace, well, it's been fantastic talking to you this afternoon, and your passion just absolutely comes through. It really has been brilliant. Where do people find more about you and Music for Dementia?
Well, we'd love people to go to our website, musicfordementia.org.uk, and on there they can sign up as a supporter of the campaign to add their voice to making music an integral part of care. But they can also find lots of resources and tools, including a link to our very own online radio stream, m4dradio.com, where people can tune in for free, and it's ad-free, importantly, any time of the day, to listen to music, to help them use music as part of the care that they're providing.
Brilliant. Well, we'll put all those links in the show notes. Thank you so much for spending time with me this afternoon. And yeah, wonderful. Thanks very much, Grace Meadows.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure. Such a joy.
Thank you once again to Grace Meadows for taking time out to join me on the podcast. To find out more about Grace and music therapy for dementia, check out the show notes on our website at theretirementcafe.co.uk. Well, I'll also put links to our other dementia podcasts. As always, if you've enjoyed this episode, please do leave us a review on Apple Podcasts to help more people like you discover the podcast. And for more video content about retirement planning, head to my YouTube channel, Justin King MFP. So until next time, I'm Justin King, helping you feel more informed in your retirement and wishing you a very Merry Christmas. I'll see you again in the new year.